The Soyuz rocket as Ron Garan, Alexander Semakutuyayev, and Andrei Borisenko begin their journey to the International Space Station.
Wow, can you imagine? Ron Garan is a former NASA astronaut who served aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery and spent 6 months on the International Space Station, 3 spacewalks. Now he's giving us a perspective from 71 million miles away.
And today we are lucky enough and honored enough to have Ron in town. Forget 71 million miles. We have him inches from us on our morning show this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Ken. Good morning.
Wow, with an astronaut, someone who has been out there in space looking down on Mother Earth, is kind of, I guess where we'll start is, give us your perspective as you look down on Mother Earth and you're doing what you do, your important work up in the capsule. How does that change your mind, your paradigm, your perspective?
Well, I think it changes it in a lot of ways. I think one of the biggest ways it changes is the biggest thing it changes is your definition of home. And looking back at the Earth, I really felt like my home was the Earth, and it really was driven home when I came back to the Earth and I landed, and here I am in a capsule. And I'm looking out the window and I see the Earth, I see a flower, and I'm thinking I'm home. But what was really interesting about that, I was in Kazakhstan. And so to me, at that moment, my home was no longer New York where I grew up or Houston where I lived with my family, but the Earth. And I think that's a big paradigm shift that you can get from looking at the planet.
Wow, that's interesting.
Since you've been back, you've done a lot of humanitarian work. Is that something that changed, or is that something you've always done?
I think it's something that was reinforced by my experience going to space. I didn't go to space and all of a sudden realize that we have a responsibility to leave the place a little bit better than we found it. But going to space and seeing our planet from that perspective really drove that home. And really, the big thing about that was the contradiction, the sobering contradiction between the beauty of our planet on one hand and the unfortunate realities of life on our planet on the other hand. And it really hits home when you see that from space.
Wow.
Well, you're in town to screen Planetary,
That's right.
The picture here. And in this project here, it asks an important question, one about who we are in relationship to each other, in relationship to the planet.
Exactly.
How do you identify with that?
I think this is one of the most important questions we can ask, because I think the reason why we still face so many critical issues and problems on our planet is because we haven't asked that question. We haven't asked the question of, when something happens on the other side of the planet, we think, oh, those poor people over there. We don't realize, well, that's us. I mean, we're not helping them, we're helping us. And I think that's a significant, not philosophy, but a significant mindset that I think, if embraced, could have a really positive effect on our global trajectory.
Let's talk a little bit about your book, The Orbital Perspective. We have one here. I love this. Lessons in Seeing the Big Picture from a Journey of 71 Million Miles. Do you feel like more of us need to kind of see that big picture?
Yeah, and one of the main tenets of the book is that you don't have to be in orbit to have the orbital perspective, and I use a lot of examples in the book of people who are exhibiting what I call the orbital perspective, who have never been to space. And so it is a big picture perspective. It's, when we zoom out and we see the planet from that perspective, things become clear, pieces of the puzzle become clear, who has them, how they fit together. But it's not just looking at things from a big picture, it's looking at things from a long time frame and realizing that slight nudges in our trajectory can have a profound positive or negative effect on where we end up.
How about your relationships with other astronauts? As many as 15 different countries were on board at one time or another on the International Space Station. How do those relationships work?
Yeah, that's another really interesting aspect of space travel. It is an international endeavor. And when we're in space, or even when we're training to be in space and the crew's on the ground, there isn't, the American astronauts and the Russian astronauts and the Canadian astronauts. It's the crew. It's the crew of whatever expedition, whatever mission that you're on, and we act as a fully integrated crew. And the good news is that we should model that on Spaceship Earth. We should solve our problems collaboratively, collectively, together, because we all share the same problems, so we should be working on them together. And it's so the idea, and one of the goals of the book was to bring that example of collaboration that built the International Space Station and put it in the context of a rapidly developing global society.
Maybe that's what we do. We put all the world leaders into orbit and let them figure it out.
The world would be a much better place.
We can bring it back down. How do you feel about the average?
That's a great idea.
How do you feel about the average?
On a two-way trip or one-way trip?
Well, it depends.
Two-way
Depends on
trip.
who you
Two-way trip. 'Cause
ask.
when they come back, they'll be much better.
There you go. How do you feel about just the regular person going to Mars and all this talk, people volunteering to take the trip and
Yeah,
so on
I think
and so forth?
I think we're on the verge of having real commercial civilian spaceflight. I think within the next decade or so, flying in space could be as commonplace as riding on an airplane.
Wow.
And I think that's going to have a profound shift in the way we view ourselves. We went to the moon to discover the moon, and in the process we discovered ourselves. And I think the more people that have that direct experience, the better off the whole world's going to be.
We're almost out of time here. Is that similar to what you would say the SpaceX and NASA were the future astronauts? I mean, how is this all going to play out?
I think the commercial activities are going to do a lot of this stuff in low Earth orbit. I think the big government space agencies are going to push over the next hill, start exploring the solar system. And I think because the commercial activities are coming on board, that's going to enable the big space agencies to do that. So,
wow.
So hopefully everybody will come out tomorrow night and see the movie.
Absolutely.
Let's get some people there. Fascinating chat. Thank you so much for coming on with us this morning, Ron. We really appreciate your presence.
Oh, my pleasure.
Ron's going to be at the Folly Theater tomorrow night for the screening of Planetary. And if you'd like to learn more about him, his book, or his humanitarian efforts, there are numerous social media sites on your screen right now. And overall, you can head to rongaran.com. Thanks again.